Today we hear John's story of the Samaritan woman at the well. To set up this story, it is important to note that this woman is the ultimate outsider. At that time, women were permitted to go to the well only at dusk or dawn, so it was improper for her to be at the well at noon. Making matters worse, she is a Samaritan. Samaritans were disliked and shunned by Jews. The feeling was mutual, I'm sure. And it would have been highly inappropriate for a Jewish man to speak to a woman in public outside his family circle. So not only is the woman flouting societal norms, it is clear from the detail in the gospel that Jesus is also breaking a social taboo. Drew spoke last week on how we all see the world through our own filter. Jesus' view of the woman is not distorted by any personal or societal filter. Not a Jewish Samaritan filter, not a male-female filter. He just sees a precious human being fetching water for her family. Jesus goes on to tell the woman how Jews and Samaritans argue over who worships the right way and in the right place. A bit like the way Catholics and Protestants argue today over dogma, rituals, and symbols, and who possesses the one true faith. We as human beings like to identify with being part of a certain group. Catholics, Protestants, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, Mets fans, Yankee fans. There are many ways we separate ourselves into competing tribes. Taken to the extreme, it leads to isolation and suspicion and fear and even hatred. Our way is always right. Their way is always wrong. What's good for them is bad for us. Their gain is our loss. Jesus is blowing up that concept in this reading. This is what the ego does. Someone has to be right, and therefore someone has to be wrong. But Jesus tells the woman they are all missing the point. No group belonging can substitute for an inner experience of the living God. Jesus uses the metaphor of the fountain within us. It is not outside, it is within. The divine is inside us. We have had it since our conception. That is the fountain of living water bubbling up, Jesus is speaking of. My brother Franciscan, Richard Rohr, uses the metaphor of a stable. We spend our lives, especially when we are young, with building our personal stables. But we can also build a community or a church stable. We want our stable to be better and bigger than other people's stables. We want ours to be the one holy Catholic and apostolic stable. But are we so busy building it that we overlook making room for God being born into it? Most religions reinforce the idea of the stable or container as all there is. Believe a few doctrines, perform some rituals. We are never challenged to attain an adult faith of service to the world and an experience of union with God. So the Samaritan woman, the consummate outsider, after her transformative encounter with Jesus, becomes not only an insider, but a leader, publicly proclaiming Jesus to the men and women of her village. Her nonconformity to the societal norms of the time was no obstacle to her acceptance and leadership in Jesus' network. Her non-Jewish stable had room for Jesus, his message, and his presence in her heart.